Sophia's hands trembled as she opened the latest bill from the electricity company. It wasn't the amount, though that had increased over the last few months, but the weight of her thoughts that made her pause. It had been a long day at work, followed by a rushed dinner to get the kids to bed. Yet now, sitting in the quiet of the kitchen with a pile of unpaid bills in front of her, Sophia felt the weight of it all pressing down on her. She was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. She had always prided herself on being the rock for her family. Since her husband Alex's demanding job had taken precedence, she had shouldered the responsibilities at home, managing the children's schedules, making sure the house was in order, and juggling her own career in the marketing world. It had never been easy, but she did it without complaint, until now. The truth was, she had started to feel invisible. Alex, once her confidant and partner, was no longer the man she had married. He came home late most nights, his mind always somewhere else, immersed in work problems or meetings that seemed to stretch endlessly. She had asked him time and again if everything was okay, but he always brushed her off with a distracted answer or a half-hearted smile. She had tried to be understanding, to offer him space and support, but it was getting harder. Tonight, however, something had shifted. As she set the bill aside and glanced at the clock, she realized that Alex was late again. She had already prepared dinner as she always did, but the seat across from her remained empty. Their children, Mia and Ben, had long since finished their meals and gone to bed. Sophia, though physically drained, found herself unable to rest. Her mind kept racing through the same questions. When was the last time we truly connected? When? Was the last time he really looked at me? The sound of the front door opening brought her back to the present. Alex's figure appeared in the doorway, his tired eyes and stiff posture betraying the fatigue he must have been carrying. He had been working late, again, but she couldn't help the flare of frustration that welled up inside her. She had grown used to it, but tonight, for reasons she couldn't explain, it hurt more than usual. Sophia? Alex's voice was lower than usual, his tone more serious than she expected. We need to talk. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Her first instinct was to brush it off, to pretend everything was fine. They'd had talks before, conversations about money, about the kids, about their future, but this felt different. There was an edge to his voice, a hint of something unspoken hanging between them. She set her wineglass down, unsure of what was to come. I'm listening, she said, trying to keep her voice neutral. She wanted to be supportive, to be the wife who was always there for him, but she could feel something inside her snapping. It's not just the finances, is it? Alex ran a hand through his hair and let out a long sigh. I've been thinking a lot about our finances, about how we're handling everything. I think it's time we take control of our own money. From now on, our budgets will be separate. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her chest tightened, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. She had heard him talk about finances before, about making sure they saved enough, about budgeting for the future, but never like this. Never so final. Never so cold. It wasn't the division of their money that stung. It was the realization that their emotional connection, their partnership, was being divided in the same way. She set the glass down more forcefully than intended. What are you saying, exactly? Her voice was shaky, but she managed to keep her tone steady. Alex's eyes darted away from hers. He couldn't meet her gaze, his body language tense. "We've been overspending. I've been looking at our accounts, and there's too much discretionary spending. We need to be more responsible. Separate accounts will make things clearer." Sophia's mind raced. So this is what it's come to? In the silence that followed, she could feel the distance growing between them, like a chasm opening at their feet. She had always tried to make the home a sanctuary, a place where they could find refuge from the world. But now, that sanctuary felt more like a battleground. She looked at him, trying to read the man she had once known so well. She had always trusted him with everything, her heart, her hopes, her dreams. But this felt like a betrayal. It wasn't just the money. It was the fact that he had been silently slipping away from her for months, and now he was formalizing the divide between them. Was this the only solution he could see? Was their marriage just another transaction to be managed? Her heart beat loudly in her chest, but instead of lashing out, instead of demanding answers or pleading with him to reconsider, she did the one thing she never expected. She nodded. "Okay," she said quietly, the words feeling heavier than anything she had ever said before. Alex looked at her in shock. "You're not going to argue?" His voice cracked, disbelief evident in his eyes. Sophia stood up slowly, her hands resting on the counter as she gazed out the window at the dark night. "What's the point? What do you want me to say, Alex?" She swallowed hard, forcing down the lump in her throat. "You've made up your mind already. I don't know how to change that." The pain in her chest wasn't just from his words. It was from the realization that they were no longer a team. The foundation they had built their lives on, the trust and understanding, was beginning to crumble. And no matter how much she loved him, she couldn't rebuild it on her own. For a moment, the silence between them felt suffocating, but Sophia didn't know what to say anymore. Her heart ached, but she didn't know how to fix what was broken. She only knew that this was the beginning of something she couldn't yet understand, and that thought, more than anything, scared her. The days following the conversation about separate finances had been a blur for Sophia. She couldn't shake the coldness that had settled between her and Alex. He hadn't changed his routine, long hours at the office, quiet dinners, and distracted evenings, but something in the air felt heavier. Every time she caught his eyes, there was a flicker of something she couldn't quite place. Guilt? Regret? Or perhaps just the resignation that things had already slipped too far. She had hoped the decision about their finances would be a small bump in the road, something they would talk through and move on from. But as the days went by, it became clear that the divide between them wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about the shared emotional currency that had once been the foundation of their relationship. Sophia found herself losing track of time. She would wake up early to prepare breakfast for the kids, get them off to school, and then spend her day working on marketing strategies for her clients. It had always been a juggling act, but now it felt like the weight of everything had multiplied. The emails, the deadlines, the endless responsibilities, none of it compared to the ache in her chest. The growing sense of loneliness that clung to her as she moved through the motions of her daily life. One evening, after another lonely dinner where Alex was barely present, Sophia decided to go for a walk to clear her head. She slipped out the back door, the cool evening air refreshing against her skin. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the distant hum of streetlights and the occasional rustle of leaves in the trees. As she walked, her thoughts swirled. She thought of the early days of their relationship, the spontaneous road trips, the quiet mornings spent reading together in bed, the way Alex would laugh at her jokes even when they weren't funny. Those moments felt like they belonged to someone else now, to a version of herself she could hardly recognize anymore. The night felt oppressive, as if the weight of the world had suddenly descended upon her shoulders. Sophia paused on the sidewalk, her hands stuffed into her jacket pockets, her breath visible in the cool night air. She felt a pang of longing for the intimacy they used to share. Why had things changed so drastically? Had they both just become too busy, too consumed by their individual lives to notice the slow erosion of their connection? Was she to blame for being so focused on the family, on keeping everything together, that she had neglected her own needs and desires? Just as the thought settled in her mind, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message from Alex. It was short and to the point. "I won't be home tonight. Work emergency. Don't wait up." Sophia's heart sank, but she quickly pushed the feelings aside. It had become all too familiar. She glanced at the empty street in front of her, the silence pressing in, and realized that this loneliness, was now her constant companion. She didn't know what had become of the man she married, the one who used to prioritize her, who would surprise her with flowers or stay up late to talk about their hopes and dreams. Instead, now he was a stranger, more focused on work than on the woman who had stood by him through thick and thin. She walked back home slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. When she entered the house, the quiet seemed almost suffocating. The kids were asleep, and the only sounds in the house were the ticking of the clock and the distant hum of the refrigerator. She stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair, where Alex usually sat. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of everything. Her unspoken fears, her unanswered questions, the ache of unfulfilled promises. Sophia sat down at the table, her head in her hands. She had always been the one who held everything together. But now, she wasn't sure how much more she could hold. How had it come to this? She didn't want to be angry, didn't want to push Alex away. But how could she keep pretending everything was fine when she was drowning in uncertainty? As the days passed, the tension between them deepened. Alex continued to withdraw into his world of work, and Sophia found herself retreating into hers. She was no longer angry at him. She was simply numb. There was nothing to say anymore. She had tried over and over to reach him, but each attempt had been met with silence or an excuse about being too busy. But Sophia wasn't blind. She could see the changes in him, the small shifts in his demeanor, the way he no longer looked her in the eyes when they spoke, the way he started leaving his phone on the kitchen counter unlocked, something she had always found odd. It was as if, with every passing day, they were both becoming strangers to each other. One afternoon, as she was folding the laundry in the bedroom, she caught a glimpse of Alex's phone on the nightstand. It wasn't something she had ever done before, but something in her gut told her she needed to look. She picked it up, her heart pounding in her chest. As she unlocked it, her breath caught in her throat. There were texts on the screen. Texts from someone she didn't recognize. They were casual, but there was an intimacy in the words, something that felt wrong. Sophia's mind raced, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through the messages. There was nothing overtly incriminating, but the tone, the casualness of it all, left her with a deep, gnawing feeling. Who was this woman? Why had Alex kept this from her? She quickly set the phone down, her heart racing. The walls around her, which had already been crumbling, now felt like they were about to collapse. She didn't know what to do with the feeling of betrayal, the sharp sting of doubt that had seeped into her bones. She had never thought Alex would be capable of something like this. Yet here she was, questioning everything she thought she knew. Sophia sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands in her lap, the weight of it all too much to bear. How had they gotten here? How had they gone from a love so deep and real to a place where silence, secrets, and distance now defined their relationship? Her mind churned with possibilities, but one thought kept rising above the rest. Was this the end? She didn't have answers, but one thing was certain. She couldn't keep pretending anymore. The next step would require a decision, but whether it would be one of reconciliation or of letting go, she didn't yet know. The future had never felt so uncertain, and yet she knew she couldn't go on like this, stuck in a place where no one was truly seen or heard. It was time for the walls to come down. The weeks had dragged on since that day when Alex's message had left her feeling cold and detached. And yet Sophia still found herself at a crossroads. The house, once filled with the familiar hum of family, life now seemed eerily quiet. The kids were growing more independent, and even Mia, her eldest daughter, had started to notice the tension. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Mia asked one evening as she sat beside Sophia, reading a book. "You and Dad haven't really talked lately. You don't laugh like you used to." Sophia had tried to smile, to reassure her, but she could feel the weight of her own heartache pressing down on her. She couldn't lie to Mia, not when her daughter's perceptive eyes could see the truth in her silence. "I'm just tired, sweetheart," Sophia had replied, her voice catching slightly. "Everything will be fine." But the lie felt hollow, and so she continued her routine, pushing through each day with a quiet endurance, always busy, always present, but never truly alive. Alex, as usual, seemed more distant. His work was his world, his focus never wavering. The man who used to take time out of his day to call her, to check on her, to surprise her with small gestures of affection, was now a shadow in their home. He had stopped coming home for dinner, his presence more like an afterthought than a priority. And Sophia, no matter how many times she tried to reach out, felt as if she was always a step behind him, chasing a version of their marriage that no longer existed. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, she sat in the kitchen. The moonlight casting long shadows on the floor, Alex had sent another one of his curt, emotionless texts. "Late night. Don't wait up." She hadn't even flinched at the message anymore. It had become routine, part of the pattern she was no longer sure how to break. She found herself staring at the clock, each minute ticking louder in her ears, a reminder of the growing distance between them. She needed to talk to him, really talk. She had avoided it for weeks, not knowing how to start, afraid of the confrontation that seemed inevitable. But as the silence enveloped her, she realized that if they didn't address this now, they might never find their way back to each other. The thought of living in this emotional vacuum for the rest of her life was unbearable. With a deep breath, she grabbed her phone and dialed his number. It rang twice before he picked up. His voice was strained, a subtle crack in his usual indifference. "Hey," he answered, his voice sounding more tired than usual. "What's up?" Sophia's heart beat faster, the words suddenly difficult to find. She had rehearsed what to say in her head 1,000 times, but now that she was actually speaking to him, she was unsure where to begin. "Alex, She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We need to talk about us." There was a long silence on the other end. She could almost hear the shift in his posture, the way he braced himself for the conversation he had been avoiding. "Not now, Sophia. I'm really busy," he said, his voice colder than usual. But this time, Sophia refused to let it go. She had spent far too long being patient, being understanding, and yet nothing had changed. She couldn't wait for the perfect moment anymore. There was no perfect moment. There was only now. "No," she said firmly, her voice stronger than she had expected. "We're not doing this again, Alex. You've been shutting me out for weeks. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not." He was silent for a moment, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sophia felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he was finally listening. "Sophia, he started, but she cut him off, not allowing him to hide behind his usual excuses. "No, you don't get to brush this off anymore," she said, her hands trembling with a mix of frustration and determination. "You've been withdrawing from me, from our family, for so long now. I don't even recognize you anymore. I don't even know who you are. You're distant and cold and I'm just supposed to keep going like it's nothing?" Alex's breath was shaky on the other end. She could hear the tension in his voice, the emotions that he had been holding back. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Sophia," he said quietly. "I've been so focused on work, on trying to fix things, on making sure we're financially stable. I thought if I could provide for you and the kids, everything else would fall into place." Sophia's chest tightened at his words. She had always known that Alex's work consumed him, but hearing him admit it out loud, hearing him say that he thought providing was enough, it hurt in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't just the long hours, the missed dinners, the emotional neglect. It was the fact that he had believed all this time that he could buy her love and their connection back. "But what about us, Alex?" she whispered, the ache in her voice raw. "What about the intimacy, the partnership we used to have? You've been so busy trying to fix everything on the surface, you forgot that I'm right here, trying to hold on to something that doesn't even exist anymore." There was a long pause. For the first time, Sophia could hear Alex's breath catch, the vulnerability he had been hiding spilling through. "I don't know how to fix it," he admitted finally, his voice almost cracking. "I've tried, Sophia. I've been trying to hold everything together, but I don't know how to fix us." Sophia's heart broke at the sound of his words. She had always believed that he was invincible, that he could weather any storm. But now, hearing him so defeated, so lost, made her realize that he had been fighting a battle alone, one she hadn't even known he was waging. They had both been so wrapped up in their own struggles that they had forgotten to fight for each other. "I don't know if we can fix this, Alex," she said softly, her voice cracking with the weight of her own fears. But we need to try, or we'll lose everything. I will lose everything. The line went quiet, and for a moment, Sophia thought he had hung up. But then, very quietly, Alex spoke again. I don't want to lose you, Sophia. I don't. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and raw. Sophia closed her eyes, her heart pounding. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Something they could rebuild together. But that would depend on whether they were both willing to fight for it, or whether the walls between them had already grown too high to climb. The days following their conversation hung like a fragile thread, a tentative peace that neither of them fully trusted. Alex had made an effort. He tried, in his own way, to be present. For the first time in weeks, he was home before dinner. He sat at the table with her and the kids, making small talk, offering the occasional smile. But there was a tension in the air, a silent undercurrent that neither of them could ignore. Sophia, for her part, tried to convince herself that things were improving. They had made progress after all. Alex had opened up, admitted his fears, and that meant something, didn't it? But every evening, as the kids went to bed and the house settled into its nighttime quiet, she found herself waiting for something more. Waiting for the deep connection that had been lost. Waiting for the intimacy that had once been their strength. And each night, as Alex retreated to his side of the bed and she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were still miles apart. It wasn't just about the physical distance between them, though. It was emotional. She could see it in the way he answered her questions with short responses, the way he avoided deep topics, the way he no longer touched her as he once had. It was as if he was holding himself back, as if the man she had once known so intimately was now a stranger. But there was one thing that Sophia was sure of. They couldn't continue like this. The longer they avoided the hard truths, the further they would drift. She could sense that Alex was struggling with his own inner demons, pressures from work, from his own inadequacy as a husband, the fear of losing her. But she couldn't keep playing the role of the patient wife, waiting for him to come to her. She needed him to step forward, to meet her halfway. One Friday night, after the kids had gone to bed, Sophia took a deep breath and asked him to sit down with her on the couch. She had been thinking about this moment all week, preparing herself for it, knowing it would be difficult. The air was thick with anticipation as Alex sat next to her, his posture rigid, his eyes not meeting hers. Sophia, I know things aren't perfect, Alex started, his voice tentative. But I'm trying. I'm here, aren't I? Sophia nodded, her eyes searching his face for the man she remembered. He looked tired, worn down by something she couldn't yet understand. The distance between them wasn't just about the silent moments or the lack of conversation. It was in his eyes. The warmth that once radiated from him when he looked at her was now replaced by an emptiness that left her feeling small. I appreciate that, Alex, she said, her voice soft but firm. But trying isn't enough anymore. We need to do more than just show up. I need to know you're really here with me, and not just physically. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I am here, I swear. But I don't know what you want from me. I've been working so hard. I don't need you to work harder, Alex, she interrupted gently, but with a quiet force in her tone. I need you to be here emotionally. I need you to stop hiding behind work. Stop pretending like you can fix everything with your job or your money. You're so focused on everything outside of us that I feel like I'm losing you. I feel like I'm losing the man I fell in love with. The silence between them was deafening. Alex's face darkened, his jaw tightening as he struggled to find the right words. I never meant to hurt you, Sophia. But what am I supposed to do? I can't be everything you need when I don't even know what that is anymore. Sophia's chest tightened, the weight of his words sinking in. It wasn't just that he had withdrawn, it was that he was lost. Lost in his own guilt, his own fear of not being enough. And in trying so hard to fix everything outside of their relationship, he had forgotten that they needed fixing too. Alex, she said quietly, I've never asked you to be perfect. I just need you to be present. I need to feel like we're a team again. I don't want to keep fighting this alone. Alex took a long breath, looking down at his hands. Sophia could see the battle waging inside of him. He wanted to be the man she needed, but he was caught in the web of his own insecurities, his own failures. The truth was, he didn't know how to be vulnerable with her anymore. Not after all the distance, the silence, the fear of rejection. I'm scared too, he admitted, his voice low, almost a whisper. I'm scared that I've already lost you. And I don't know how to get back to what we had. Sophia's heart clenched at his words. She hadn't realized just how much he was hurting, how much he feared the very thing she had been dreading, that they were growing apart, that the love they had once shared might never return. We haven't lost it yet, she said softly, reaching out to take his hand. The touch was hesitant at first, but he didn't pull away. She could feel the weight of the moment, the fragile hope that hung between them. But we're going to have to fight for it, Alex, and fighting means being honest with each other. No more hiding behind work or excuses. No more pretending we're okay when we're not. For a moment there was silence, but this time, it wasn't the uncomfortable kind. It was the kind that signaled something shifting, something breaking free. Alex finally met her eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she saw a glimmer of the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had always been willing to fight for what mattered. I want to fight for us, he said, his voice steadier now, more certain. I don't know how to fix everything, but I'm willing to try. I'm not giving up on you, Sophia. Her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a promise that everything would be perfect, but it was the beginning of something real, something they could work through together. I'm not giving up on us either, she replied, squeezing his hand tighter. The weight of the moment settled between them, but it wasn't as heavy as it had been before. It was lighter, filled with a sense of possibility. There was still work to do, still walls to break down, but for the first time in a long time, Sophia felt a spark of hope. Maybe they could find their way back to each other after all. But the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. There were still deep wounds, old patterns, and unspoken fears to navigate. Yet, in that moment, both of them understood that the real fight had just begun, and they were ready to face it together. The days that followed their conversation were both hopeful and challenging. Alex and Sophia had made a quiet pact between them, a promise to rebuild, to try again. But rebuilding was never a simple task. It was raw and uncomfortable, like unearthing something broken and deciding whether to repair it or let it go. The emotional walls they had spent months, maybe years building, were not going to come down easily. Sophia had hoped for a smooth, graceful recovery. She had dreamed of waking up one day and feeling that warmth between them again, that connection she had longed for. But the reality was far messier. The silence between them, though no longer as suffocating, was still pervasive. At times, Alex's attempts to be present only felt like a reminder of what they had lost. He would sit beside her on the couch in the evenings, but his eyes seemed distant, lost in his own thoughts. They would talk, yes, but it felt more like two strangers trying to find common ground than a couple rediscovering the intimacy that had once been second nature. It wasn't that he wasn't trying. He was in his own way. He would pick up groceries, take over bedtime for the kids, and even make an effort to ask how her day had gone. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for Sophia to feel truly seen, truly heard. There was always this gap between them, an invisible chasm that neither of them knew how to cross. And Sophia could feel herself growing weary again, tired of pretending everything was fine, tired of keeping the illusion of normalcy when nothing had changed beneath the surface. One Saturday afternoon, after another quiet morning where Alex had retreated into his work, Sophia found herself alone in the kitchen. She was making lunch for the kids, the dull hum of the radio providing the only noise in the house. The house felt empty again, too quiet. She couldn't remember the last time they had laughed together, shared a moment of joy without the lingering heaviness of unspoken words. Her mind wandered back to the night they had fought, the rawness of the moment when they had both finally spoken their truths. It had felt like a breakthrough, a chance to heal. But as time passed, Sophia began to wonder if the damage had been too deep, if the chasm between them was too wide to cross. Just as she finished making the sandwiches, Alex came into the kitchen, his expression apologetic. "Hey, I was thinking, maybe we could go out tonight, just the two of us. Maybe we can finally talk, like we used to." Sophia looked at him, her heart caught between hope and skepticism. She hadn't realized how much she needed that, how much she longed to reconnect with him in a way that felt real, not forced. But then the reality of their situation hit her. Would going out to a nice restaurant really fix the cracks between them? Would a simple dinner bring back the trust they had lost? "I don't know, Alex," she replied, her voice low. "I've been waiting for us to talk for so long. We've been putting this off for weeks, months. I'm not sure a dinner will change anything." Alex's face faltered, but he quickly masked it with a gentle smile. "We can't keep putting it off, can we? We need to move forward." Sophia's chest tightened as she looked at him. It wasn't that she didn't want to move forward. It was that she was terrified of staying stuck, of continuing to repeat the same empty gestures without truly addressing the underlying issues. "I don't want to move forward, Alex. I want to feel like we're moving forward. I want to feel like I'm not just here to keep everything together while you're out there, trying to fix everything that doesn't matter." The words stung as they left her mouth, and she immediately regretted them. She saw the hurt flash across Alex's face, and for a moment, she feared she had pushed him too far. But then, to her surprise, he took a step forward, his hands shaking slightly as he reached for her. I don't know how to fix this, he said quietly, the vulnerability in his voice raw. I don't know what you need from me anymore, but I don't want to keep hurting you. Sophia blinked, the weight of his words sinking in. He didn't have the answers. He couldn't just fix everything with a few words or actions. But in that moment, something shifted between them, something more than just the attempt to reconnect. It was the recognition that neither of them had all the answers, that they were both lost in this messy, painful process of rebuilding. But they were both willing to try. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes as she looked at him. I just want you to see me, Alex. I need to know you're still here with me, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally. I need to know we're not just coasting through life together, but actually living it. Alex's eyes softened, his hand reaching up to cup her face gently. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They stood there locked in the quiet of the room, allowing the gravity of their emotions to settle between them. The weight of the past few months, the loneliness, the emotional neglect, the feeling of being unseen, began to lift ever so slightly. They were both scarred by what had happened, but they were also realizing in that fragile moment that they had a chance to heal. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be fast, but for the first time in months, they were looking at each other as partners again, not strangers bound by shared responsibilities and unspoken resentment. We'll figure this out, together, Alex whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Sophia nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in what felt like forever. Together, she agreed, the word a promise, fragile but real. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the hum of the radio and the smells of lunch cooking, Sophia realized that the path ahead wouldn't be without pain. But as long as they were willing to walk it side by side, it was a path worth taking. It was a new beginning, one that neither of them could have predicted, but both of them needed. It was the first step toward healing, and they would take it, one small step at a time. The days after that pivotal moment between Alex and Sophia were a delicate balance of hope and doubt. They had both promised to try, to communicate more honestly, to work on their relationship, to face their fears and their shortcomings together. But change was never easy, especially when the scars from years of neglect and silence still lingered beneath the surface. The tension between them had eased somewhat, but it wasn't gone. Alex was trying, and for that, Sophia was grateful. He took more initiative around the house, volunteered to take care of things without her asking, and began to spend more quality time with the kids. But the emotional distance was still there, just beneath the surface. Sophia had hoped that their conversations, their small acts of progress, would somehow bridge that gap. But it wasn't so simple. One evening, as they sat in their living room, after dinner, the kids were playing in the backyard, and the house was quiet. Alex sat beside her, a soft light from the lamp above casting shadows across his face. It was one of those rare moments when they were alone, when the house was at peace, but neither of them seemed fully at ease. Sophia broke the silence, her voice quiet, but steady. Do you ever wonder, Alex, how we got here? Alex turned to look at her, his expression pained but thoughtful. I've thought about it a lot. More than I care to admit, actually. It feels like we just drifted apart without realizing it. Sophia nodded, her fingers playing with the edge of her sleeve. I know we both had our reasons for not talking, not confronting the things that were wrong, but sometimes I wonder if we could have stopped it from happening, if we had communicated more, been more open with each other. Would things be different now? Alex's lips pressed into a thin line. I wish I had done things differently. I should have seen how much I was pulling away, but I didn't. I thought if I worked harder, if I could just fix everything else, it would make everything better. Sophia's heart ached as she heard him admit it. He had been so caught up in the idea of providing, of fixing everything around them, that he had forgotten what mattered most: their connection, their partnership. She understood that now. He had been trying to solve problems without ever truly addressing the root cause. I understand why you did it, she said softly. But what I need to hear from you, Alex, is that you see me now. That you understand that I need you, not just your effort. I need your presence, your attention. Alex's eyes darkened, and he took a deep breath. I do see you, Sophia. I see how hard you've worked to keep everything together, to keep this family going, even when I was so lost. But I wasn't seeing it before. I wasn't seeing you, and I'm sorry. Her throat tightened at his words. I didn't want to ask for too much, Alex. I kept hoping that if I waited long enough, things would change on their own. But they didn't. And I didn't want to push you away by asking for more of you, by asking for you to be emotionally present. But I can't keep going like this, pretending everything's fine when I'm dying inside. A silence fell between them. For a moment, the air felt thick, as if both of them were holding their breath, afraid to speak the truth that had been so long unspoken. The weight of their conversation pressed down on them, but it also opened something new, something raw and real. Alex reached for her hand, his touch tentative, but genuine. I don't want you to feel like you're dying inside anymore. I want to give you the part of me that's been missing. I don't know how to do that perfectly, but I'll try. For you, for us. Sophia's heart fluttered at his words. It wasn't the grand gestures she had longed for. It wasn't the quick fixes or the promises that everything would be perfect. It was his vulnerability, his willingness to admit his faults, his desire to rebuild. It was enough. I'm scared, Alex, she admitted, her voice breaking. I'm scared that we won't make it. I'm scared that we've already lost too much time. But I don't want to give up on us. I can't. The truth of her confession hung in the air, both a weight and a release. She had spent so long holding onto the hope that things would get better. But it wasn't until now that she realized the truth. She had to let go of her fear of failure in order to truly move forward. I'm scared too, Alex whispered, his thumb brushing the back of her hand. I'm scared that I'll mess it up again. But I'm willing to face that fear. I'm willing to fight for us, for this family, because I love you, Sophia. I want us to make it. Her heart swelled at his words, a mixture of relief and new, fragile hope blooming inside her. For the first time in so long, she allowed herself to believe that they could rebuild, that their love could be enough to overcome the obstacles they had placed in their own path. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be more difficult conversations ahead. But this was the beginning of something new. As they sat there hand in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Sophia realized that while they had both been lost in their own pain, In their own fears, they had never truly been apart. Not in the way she had once feared. They were still there for each other. The walls between them weren't impenetrable, but fragile. And together, they could find a way to rebuild what had been broken, piece by piece. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't an instant fix. But it was real, and that was enough. They had taken the first step toward healing, and though the road ahead was uncertain, they knew that as long as they faced it together, there was hope. And hope, as fragile as it was, could still lead them to a new beginning.